And welcome to another one of my series of interviews with subject matter experts from throughout the world talking about college and college admissions, college planning. And today I'm very pleased to have with me April Crabtree. And April is the Director of Undergraduate Admissions and Enrollment at the University of San Francisco. So welcome, April. We're glad to have you.
All right, thank you, Cindy. I appreciate you taking the time.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about how long you've been involved in college admissions and how did you get into this work?
Yes, so I sort of, like so many people, I accidentally fell into this. I had graduated from Eckerd College in 2004, and I had ultimately completed a Fulbright project in Poland and then went on to pursue a master's at the University of Tennessee. And once I had completed that, I was trying to figure out what to do next because I sort of realized I'd been in college for quite some time, or been in education for a significant period of time, and trying to figure out what that next step was. Was it a doctorate? Was it law school? Was it, at that point I was really interested and very engaged with genocide education. Did I want to work for a museum? I could not really figure out what that next step was. So I saw that Eckerd was hiring admission counselors, and I had friends who had done that before. And I thought, you know what? When they did this, it took them a couple of years. They had a way to interact with a place that they loved very much. It was a place I love very much. And then to ultimately figure it out and go on. So that was the original plan, was that I would do this for 2 years down at Eckerd, and then I would figure out somehow with, I guess angels would come down and kind of inspire me on what I was supposed to do next. And as it turned out, I just really loved it. I loved that I could employ so many different skills, that I could work on my interpersonal communication, that I could do public speaking, that I could do writing, and that it was always learning. It was always changing. So I knew it was going to be a place where I was never going to feel stagnant, so that I could keep changing and keep evolving. And then as I stayed at Eckerd for several years, working with, pretty much every project or every constituent that there was. So I worked with freshmen, I worked with some transfer students, international students for several years. So I was really able to build a pretty robust understanding of admission, and everything from the large scale strategy, which I think is some of what we're going to talk about today, and how colleges and universities really approach their pools, but then kind of that day-to-day interaction and really looking at issues of access and what does it mean to be a first generation student. So all those different ways that I got to interact with students, with their experiences, and with parents and with counselors really encouraged me to stay. And then I was very, very happy at Eckerd. I was looking for a next step and was pretty particular on the kind of school that I was looking for. I didn't want to change schools or to take a director job just for the sake of taking one. I was really looking for a school that had the same sort of values, that was very engaged in social justice, that was very focused on access. And I wanted to expand myself to work for a different kind of institution. So happily, the position opened at the University of San Francisco, and that's where I've been for the last year and a half, being able to continue to do a lot of the work that I cared about and being exposed to a lot of new things as well.
That sounds wonderful. It really is. I know my interactions with both Eckerd and USF have always been very positive, for both as counselor for students and parents. So what does a college like USF, how do they look for a student? What are you looking for in a student when you're putting together that freshman class?
I think I tell students often that when we're reading applications, when we're looking to make those decisions, we're essentially asking a mirror of two questions they're asking. So a student is asking the question, where can I go to be a happy and successful student? And I'm looking for students who I know will be academically successful here, and not just academically successful, but that are eager. They want to take on the challenge and the opportunities of the University of San Francisco, of the city of San Francisco, really, and the kinds of opportunities that we can give them here that they can't get anywhere else. At the end of the day, I think if you want to look at it from the director's chair, as I'm responsible for delivering the faculty a group of engaged students who will do all those things, who will be active in class, who will appreciate the small classes, who will do all those things. The other question I think students are asking is, where can I go to be a happy and successful person? So the other question that I'm really trying to answer, and we're trying to answer when we're looking at the admission pool, is who are going to be the people that are going to engage in this community? Who really believes in the values of a USF education, the mission, what it means to be a Jesuit, what it means to be Jesuit educated, and how they're going to really take that in as part of their everyday life. So we're looking for the kinds of students that match that. And we do that, I think, in a lot of different ways. The different pieces of the application, the ways that we interact with students help us inform both of those things. Because at the end, we want to bring a student here who's excited to be here, who's going to make the most out of these 4 years for high school students or transfer students, 2 or 3 years, and really get everything there is out of the city and out of the university so they can take that on and continue with the work that they're going to do being change makers.
So how do the students find out? What is the best way for them to learn what the institution's values are and match those values and find that where they would fit and what would be exciting for them?
Yes, and I think that's a very valid question. I think there's a lot of ways that students do that. Of course, we always would encourage students to come and see us in person, of course. However, that's not a reality for, I think, a lot of students is, whether that's financial, whether that's distance, whether that's time. Students are very busy. So what are the other ways? One of the ways we hope that students would take advantage when we're going to come to them. So when we're going to have information sessions in their area, or we're going to be at their high schools or at college fairs. I think most colleges and universities do try pretty hard to let students know that they're interested. And I think sometimes it's those personal connections, those interactions that you can really do to dig deep and to take every opportunity that you're given. If you have the opportunity to sit down one-on-one with an admission representative, or if an admission person says, what, would you like to talk to a student? Take on those opportunities so that you don't have to see us in person to continue to understand who we are. And I think there's some great ways you can do that by looking at the print collateral we send or the website. But a lot of it is going to ultimately be about, can you see yourself? Mm-hmm. And how can you answer that for you, for your family? What are you looking for? And then how does all that going to come together for you?
So when you're looking and you're visiting with all these different high schools and students are sending in questions or exploring what the college is all about, how do you put together I tell students that colleges are looking for an eclectic class. You don't want everybody to be the same. How do you determine that not everybody is the same?
I think that's the default position a lot of colleges are working from now. And I think one of the things that's always disappointing is I think the students think they're less interesting than they really are. Mm-hmm. So this happens all the time. So I'll meet with a student who will say, well, I only play one sport. And that's really kind of all I've done. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. And somewhere along the line, we decided that was a problem, but it's really not. Or I'll see students who say, I haven't really had a lot of time to do anything extracurricular because when I get home from school, I take care of my siblings, or my grandparents live at my house. And so I go home and I help with them. And I think that we try to do a good job as college and university representatives of understanding, I guess in some ways, our implicit bias and what we are coming to a student with, and then trying to step back and take into account their context. So what has mattered in their life? And that actually can tell us so much. The student who's had the time or the opportunity to do a service trip abroad, that's amazing for that student. But a student who maybe just volunteers at their sibling's school is going to be equally important in the process, because that's a reality. And so we're trying to build a cadre of students who are going to come in and represent a lot of different pieces of our real society, and who can educate each other about opportunities and challenges. And I think that's kind of what we want those, it's great if we bring you in, but when we're talking about a small school especially, we want those conversations to be rich. We want those conversations to be challenging. And they're occasionally going to be uncomfortable. And that's what it's about, is being able to interact. So we're looking at really the context of a student, trying to meet them where they are and understand everything about their experience.
Now, some colleges will track that, how many times they've talked to someone or sent emails or come to the college. Is that, and it's often termed demonstrated interest, is that something that you track on a formal metric level, or is it more organic as you've described it? It's like meeting with people and seeing, learning more about the college.
Right. So we do track many things. So if we see a student at a college fair, if we see them at a high school visit, and I think that there's a lot of ways to look at this. So, you know, we're not looking at demonstrated interest in a way of not admitting students. So that's not why we're looking at it. Instead, we're trying to make good decisions. So how can we go out and reach the most number of students? How can we go find those students? And sometimes we're using those as points to help us guide our strategy, our recruitment processes. Sometimes it's helpful, a lot of that happens organically is helpful for me to go beyond the papers. So when I get that student's application, if I remember meeting that student at a high school visit, or if I had a conversation with them, or we've been exchanging emails back and forth, that gives me a little bit more of a human context. So it's more than just the words they're going to put in the essay and the list they make in their extracurriculars or the grades that they've earned. So I think that, for a school like us, demonstrated interest is about us helping you see yourself and helping you make the connections on all the levels that are important to you as a student. So academically, what are you interested in studying and why? And what can we tell you about the university? And what are faculty doing? And what are students researching? And what's available here in the city that we're going to connect you with? And if you have always been a runner, we want to talk to you about how you can continue to pursue that. Or, if you've always been an artist, if art's always been a big part of your inspiration, we want to connect that. So a lot of that demonstrated interest for a school like us is really helping to make sure that we can show you exactly who USF and San Francisco is as you're making a decision, and less so in the process of deciding who we are or are not going to admit.
I love how you put that as making those right decisions for admissions as opposed to, and I think that's the part that a lot of people get hung up on and look at it from that perspective. You want to find schools you want students to want you as a college as much
Right.
as they want, you want them. So that makes a lot of sense. Now, as you've seen college admissions evolve and change over the last few years, what do you foresee as the college admissions process changing, like in the next 5 years?
The
As
one
you're
thing
on the
that
forefront of that.
the one thing I think I'm really excited is to see how many more conversations are being had about access. About talking about, Trinity just released, I have to give a plug to my friend Angel Perez, Trinity just released that they're going to waive the application fee for first generation students. So I think that I'm really excited about the depth of conversation that's being had amongst administrators, amongst admission counselors, amongst high school counselors as well, to look at a system that was built for a particular piece of society a long, long time ago, and then really looking at the reality of the United States, the reality of the world now, and how that's very different. And I'm really excited to see how we're going to continue to have those conversations. Every day someone else is going test optional. Why are they doing that? So I've been really excited to see how that's going to happen, how we continue to have conversations about cost. And cost and value, how all those things tend to be changing. I'm actually pretty excited for prior year this year for FAFSA. I love the idea that we can give students a picture of their financial aid so much earlier, because it has to be an academic fit. It has to be a social fit. It has to be a personal fit. It has to be a financial fit for a student and their family. And the more information that we can give on every single one of those layers, the more comfortable we feel that the student's going to make the best decision, that they're going to be here, continue that path, and get to graduation and look back and say, this was it. This was the place that I needed to be.
I think that's very true. And it is exciting to see the discussions and conversations about access and affordability, and those two have to go together. So what are your thoughts about the coalition then? Is that something, because that's part of the proposal for the new coalition application, is and I wasn't at NACAC, so you just came back from NACAC. I didn't see a lot of discussion about it. I know last year there was a ton of discussion about it, but kind of what happened at NACAC with that?
Not much, I'll have to say. I think that, it will be interesting to see how it plays out. I think that the members of the coalition are taking some of the criticism very seriously, and I think that I think we're all looking for ways to make this process more accessible, to make this process, it's full of jargon and it's complicated, and it really requires so many people to be involved. And if that's not your situation, that just puts college further and further away from you, and that's not what we're trying to do. So I really am interested to see what's going to happen next with the coalition, to see if they've been able to address a lot of these things, to address, how do you get that information out to school counselors who may be in the situation that their caseload is 600 students.
Mm-hmm.
That's very different than an independent counselor, or a high school counselor who has the privilege of being at an independent school, or even at a smaller, or even at a public school that's well funded, that division. They may have 40 or 60 or 80 students that they're responsible for, which is still significant. So I'm really kind of curious to see how the coalition members are going to take this on, and really take it on as a challenge to get it out there, and to ultimately, all of our roles should always be, you don't need to come to my school. You
Right.
need to go to college somewhere, and we're gonna work better together, because for some students we're not the right choice, and maybe the state institution in their home state is the right choice. Maybe one of the very selective schools is the right choice, but as long as you go, that's what we should be really happy with at the end of the day.
So another set of the population that is not going to college at the rate they used to are males.
Mm.
So are there some initiatives or things out there that you're familiar with that might help us as counselors, especially to encourage our males to take that step and that commitment?
Yeah, I think that this conversation is coming up more and more frequently. I'm very curious to see. I mean, I think when I talk to my colleagues, I'm seeing a lot more students take gap years.
Hmm.
And there's not been a lot of conversation on whether those are men or women who are doing that, and hopefully being able to counsel students to take that time that they need, right? Especially for men, maybe men who might be coming in on the younger end. I think there's so many things, so many variables that are going on with that. It seems like that there's a lot of schools that actually are starting some men's groups, so they can bring men together when they get to campus to talk about masculinity, to talk about what is all this posturing that seems to have to happen, according to Hollywood, on college campuses. To bringing men of color together into smaller groups, and saying, okay, let's talk about the issues that you're facing in your everyday life. Let's talk about the way that we confront race on campus. Let's talk about that. And I think that a lot of that is helping some retention efforts. And if we can do more on the high school side to create some of those same communities, that might continue to bridge that pathway into college.
I know in our area we have a group that uses soccer, and and we have a lot of a large Hispanic community. So the boys will go participate in the soccer, and they're using that as a vehicle to encourage them to go on. There's a group up there in Oakland that does the same thing with sports, and working with African American males and helping them to use their sports as a way to access higher education and build that goal and that momentum, that desire. So I see groups that are using that testosterone type of activity to help move them along. So
Yeah.
what is the a missing piece of advice that you wish counselors knew?
Oh, I've been thinking about this morning, and I was thinking about all the things that I wish the counselors were thinking about or remembering. And I think that, one of the things, when we talk about implicit bias, and we talk about, I think that we're really pushing our students to understand that, but have we done a good job educating ourselves and our colleagues on what that means? So as a counselor, when you're proofreading an essay, what are you taking for granted? What are you not? At what point, at a certain point, we start making an assumption of what students know and what they don't. I had the privilege of going to Guam. The Department of Education put on um, a college workshop. So they brought all the high school students and seniors from the public schools in, and I did a very long, actually, workshop on college vocabulary. And until I actually sat down, I didn't realize how much there really was. We make a lot of assumptions. We say undergraduate. we expect people to know what that means. We say major, we expect them to know what that means. We say all these things. So I would really challenge counselors to always be taking a step back and not assuming too much, and using the position that they have of being influencers, to change the way that we're thinking about this, to make this accessible from the words we use to the ways that we interact with families, to get at those things. I think that, you mentioned international counselors. I think that as part of your group earlier, I think that the one thing that we need to do a better job of when we, as a counseling community, both high school and college, is talking to our students about what to expect,
Mm-hmm.
and talking about the realities of what it means to exist, frankly, in a non-white body in this society. So when we talk, I was thinking about, I used to recruit in India, and when I recruited there, everyone for the most part is Indian. And when you then come from a society where everyone looks very similar to you, now there are other levels of that. There's class bias, there's all the kinds of things, and then you come to the United States, you've become the other. And this happens within communities right here in the US as well. And what does that mean? And how do we prepare ourselves to confront bias? How do we prepare our students to recognize privilege? And I think that that is a big piece of what we need to do, in some of our communities, especially ones that are more affluent, is to help our students recognize that their context isn't the only one, and really is not the reality of most of the people that they're going to meet. So continuing that education beyond shaping the college list, beyond practicing for the SAT, I think this is the real world. This is the stuff that's going to get them in and have those big conversations and get them engaged on campus.
I think that's very, very good advice, and something that we need to keep asking ourselves over and over again, and kind of reassessing, because it yeah, those biases and things do creep up sometimes unexpectedly, and sometimes we may not even realize that we have them until a particular student, a particular situation presents itself. So I think that's very, very good words of advice. So thank you, April, very much. This
Yeah,
has been
absolutely.
very informative, and I know my students will really appreciate the words that you've shared and the thoughts that you've shared. So
And if any of you ever need anything, just let me know.
okay, will do. Thank you.
You're welcome.